Hello, lovely people. Welcome to Ari Talks About Music. I'm Ari, and today I'll be reviewing the new Tame Impala album, Deadbeat. Here we have the fifth album from the Australian singer-songwriter and multi-instrumentalist Kevin Parker, better known as Tame Impala. And given that it has been 5 years since his previous album, The Slow Rush, this one definitely was highly anticipated after its announcement. And given my enjoyment of pretty much every single Tame Impala album so far, I was really hoping and expecting for this to just be another fantastic release from Kevin Parker, which is why I have ended up finding myself actually feeling quite frustrated by a lot of the tracks on this album, as I feel like there are a lot of really cool ideas at the very least that are shown off here, and to be fair, some of the individual songs are still pretty good, but I do just find it quite annoying and frustrating how a lot of the songs just do not come anywhere close to the potential that they so obviously had. But if nothing else, that does at least show me that Tame Impala has definitely not completely fallen off, as like I said, there are still so many fantastic ideas floating about on this album. It's more so just how the ideas are used is where it starts to fall apart a little bit. And all things considered, I do think that Mild Ways is actually a pretty good opener, as I think it's definitely one of the better songs on the album. I love the very deep sounding piano as the leading instrument. I think that's a really cool style that we've not really seen Kevin Parker do much of until now, as well as just the way that the song progresses with the layers being added in an almost house kind of way, which again is actually a pretty cool style that fits in surprisingly well to a song that's otherwise not really all that electronic. And even then, just each little refrain and every moment does just feel like it's adding something new to the whole experience. And unfortunately, this is one of the only songs that I can really say such positive things for. And the next song, No Reply, does just feel like a complete flop in comparison, as I just find this song to be overall boring, forgettable, and seemingly completely unable to actually commit to any kind of sound or style to make it consistent. And on the whole, I just find this track to be so messy, which is quite frustrating because a lot of the individual moments are actually not too bad, but it's just that each one is so short, which doesn't really make it all that memorable or give it enough time to actually explore the idea in full, and then fit them all together in the song, and it's just a complete mess that I think is so badly put together. And then you have Dracula, which I think is the closest thing this album has to a classic sounding Tame Impala song, and also the last genuinely good song for quite a while now on the tracklist, just given that nearly every song after this is at best mediocre, but a lot of them are just as bad as No Reply. But going back to Dracula, I think this is definitely just one of the most memorable and well put together songs the album has to offer. The chord progressions are really compelling, as well as just having a really good atmosphere, and you even have a lot of kind of typical Dracula and vampire sound effects, which I think a lot of the time on songs like this can be overbearing, but it's done in a really tasteful way. And I even think that Kevin Parker's vocals on this are some of the best on the album, as he does show off quite an impressive range. And then you have Loser, which is the first of many disappointments coming after Dracula, with the song again just following that same format that a lot of tracks on this album do have, which is just to allude to something cool, maybe showcase a cool idea, a cool sound, but then just kind of doing that same thing over and over again and not really giving any opportunity for the idea to actually be explored in any meaningful depth. And because of that, it ends up being boring and repetitive, but still just really messy and completely lacking in the overall direction. And then you have Oblivion, which I think is just one of the most confusing songs on the album, in the sense that I just have absolutely no idea what the vision for this one even was, as the whole song is pretty much just a random assortment of sounds with no real rhyme or reason to them. I find that its progression and structure is very generic and predictable, as well as the way that it just completely nonsensically throws around all of these sounds and ideas, seemingly without any regard for how they would actually sound put together in a song, which again just continues to frustrate me for how some of the individual moments on this track actually do kind of showcase a pretty cool idea. And it's just frustrating that not only are all of them put together in a way that simply doesn't work at all, but none of the ideas that are showcased on this song are there for long enough to actually have anything interesting come of them. Then Not My World, I think, is a slight improvement from that. I feel like I can actually kind of see what he was going for on the song, if nothing else. I do actually quite like the very muffled, distant nightclub kind of sound effects this song has, even if it is maybe just a little bit more dreary than I would have hoped. And I do think that the electronic progression towards the end of this track is actually pretty good as well, and I think is one of the very few instances where this album has a cool idea and actually uses it to some amount of potential. And it definitely just feels a lot less out of place than many of the other ideas that this album has that it just doesn't manage to use for whatever reason. Piece of Heaven is another song that I do just really struggle quite a lot to see what the vision actually was for this one. It just feels really slow and boring, and even the moments where it does try to be a bit louder or build towards something feels so painfully predictable. And despite the fact that it does really feel like so little happens in this song, it still manages to come across as really messy. Then Obsolete is a slight improvement from that, if nothing else, this song at least having somewhat of a clearer direction. I think it still lacks any main defining feature that makes it particularly notable, but I can at least appreciate it on the level of just being a chill song that is nice to have on in the background and is still at least reasonably well put together and well performed. And I think that the instrumental outro in particular is also pretty good, being a moment that's a bit of an oddball, being pretty unique, but not in a way that makes it sound really weird or out of place. Ethereal Connection, as its title would have you believe, is most definitely a very ethereal song, but unfortunately not at all in a good way. I feel like this song just relies far too much on its super heavy reverb, and there really is nothing else to it other than the fact that it's just long and, well, obviously ethereal. And then towards the end, it attempts to go for a much harder electronic build-up, but honestly, this is just one of the weirdest and worst moments on the whole song, given that it just doesn't fit in at all. It feels completely random and out of place, and there's just no depth to it, and there was clearly just no thought put into how this moment would actually play out on the song. See You on Monday, You're Lost is just such a random track that comes completely out of nowhere, and to be honest, I want to call it out of place, but what does out of place even mean on an album that's this messy? I think that the transition both in and out of the song in the two neighboring tracks just makes absolutely no sense, as well as just the song itself having absolutely no sense of flow or structure on any level, as well as just having frustratingly little musical depth, as it really feels like there is absolutely no backbone to its sound whatsoever. Then we get to Afterthought, which is the first time since Dracula in the tracklist that I can actually say I genuinely think this is a great song. So at least I can say that all of my favourite songs on the album are spread out and not just all just gathered up in one place together. I absolutely love the super groovy bass line this song has, as well as a lot of the electronic sounds, and the way it builds I think also is really cool, and just manages to use a lot of electronic instruments in the mix without any of them sounding annoying or overbearing or out of place. And also just the fact that this song is actually able to commit to an idea and use it really well, which I think is something that this album unfortunately is just lacking so much of. And then End of Summer I think did have quite a lot of potential. Just how good the opening is, I absolutely love the really hazy synth effects, and I think again this track definitely shows some of Kevin Parker's best performed vocals the album has to offer. What, however, does just really frustrate me about this song is the super heavy, almost nightclub style percussion that completely ruins, I think, what could have been a genuinely amazing album closer. And even then, just by the end of the song, all of the ideas that are there have just been happening for so long and don't really go anywhere, which I think is just an annoyingly common trope on the album as a whole. And so overall, I just find myself being really frustrated by how much of an incomplete mess this album is, especially just with how many genuinely really good moments and ideas there are that just nothing really seems to come of them. But at least what it does demonstrate is that Kevin Parker does still have a lot of really cool ideas, and on future projects I'm definitely hoping to see him actually use those ideas to their full potential, unlike what he's delivered on this one. But it really is just annoying how much there is on this album that just doesn't make sense and doesn't fit in. It's actually so frustrating because of how much potential nearly every song did actually have. And so that is why I'll be giving this album a 4 out of 10. Thank you so much for watching this review. Please be sure to listen to this album yourself and tell me your thoughts below. Please leave a like if you liked the video, and please leave a dislike if you didn't like the video, and remember to stay hydrated.